So, lightning talk, very short introduction from me, because most of the people here on the call work in this field. You're probably on the call because you have a belief that shared mobility should be playing more of a role in decarbonisation of transport. So, I think I've got 4 slides. So the first one I've called Carbon Realities. And this is a chart from the decarbonisation plan, which the department put out, the Setting the Challenge document, which shows the gap between their current policy projection and some policy pathways which might need to be followed to be consistent with net zero. And there are arguments about whether those policy trajectories are as yet ambitious enough, but nonetheless, there's a significant gap there between where things are now and where things need to be, both in the short run, but obviously growing over time. So even with much greater ambition around vehicle technology, because of the speed with which fleets renew themselves, I think there's a huge gap building up between where we can get to and where we need to be. And if we fail early in the carbon period, we've got to do even more later in the period to stick within the budget. And as you can see, that looks frighteningly challenging. So there are some real carbon realities which suggest to me that we need to make much better use of the mobility that we have there. We also take a whole life emissions perspective. I mean, the figures you can debate about whole life emissions, but ones that we see there, battery electric vehicle in 2030 is about 50% of a whole life emissions of an ICE vehicle in 2012. Obviously, technologies will change, industrial processes will change, that figure could reduce, but nonetheless, the energy requirements in constructing vehicles and batteries and the managing the infrastructures that go around them are significant. And so anything we can do to reduce the number of vehicles that we have, as well as the vehicles that move around the network, is going to be really, really important. And there are some massive opportunities. So we shared with you the report on shared mobility that we did with a commission on travel demand. These charts, I think, are particularly striking, done by my colleague Gillian Annabel and others here at Leeds. This is the amount of time that vehicles are simultaneously in use during any period of the week. So the maximum is 14% of our vehicles simultaneously moving around on a Tuesday in the morning and the evening peak. It's as low as 8% at the weekend. So we could deliver a lot of the mobility that we deliver today, but with far fewer vehicles. But that would require a substantially different system of mobility than the one we have at the moment, where everything is organised around individual ownership. And then we have the stats which Ali Claban and LiftShare have been arguing for over a decade now. 36 million empty seats during the morning commute. It's 1.2 occupied seats per car, and 62% of all car trips have a lone driver. And it makes a huge difference to the amount of vehicle traffic that we plan for, whether we increase that from 1.55 to 1.7, say, or whether we allow that to decrease to 1.3. It makes a huge difference to what the future investment program looks like and to the scale of the carbon challenge. And I think over time, although there's been really significant improvements in vehicle technology, you can see that we've wasted much of that in vehicles getting bigger and in fewer people being in the vehicles that we drive around. So when we look to technology alone for the solution, we won't get all of the benefits that we anticipate that we might. So there are huge opportunities, both in terms of reducing the number of vehicles we hold, but also in terms of improving the utilization of the vehicles that we have. And that argument, I feel, has to be really strongly made as part of the decarbonisation plan. And the reason I say that, and the reason why I call it crunch time, is that the department's current forecasts for car ownership are a growth from 27 million in 2018 to somewhere between 37 and 40.5 million by 2040. So there isn't a world in which you have that level of car ownership where shared mobility has worked. The two things are completely incompatible. If people go down the increased individualized ownership model, shared mobility will continue to operate as a niche and at the margins. There isn't a world where you can have that level of car ownership where the carbon trajectories are close to being met. That's because of embodied emissions. It's because we'd have growth in car ownership before we have greening of the fleet. There'd be a huge infrastructure demand that would come with that, and enormous inefficiency in operation. So it's crunch time for me, because if we can't persuade the decarbonisation plan to at least be open to a radically different model of ownership, and if we have underpinning it still the old belief that we will continue to grow the private car fleet, then I think the space for shared mobility is significantly closed off. So the question we're asking today is, what does it take to deliver a credible, widespread alternative to the individualised car ownership model? And what will need to be in the decarbonisation plan in order for that to really be part of what happens in the next few years?